A distinct work is assigned to every Christian. God requires everyone to be a worker in his vineyard. You are to take up the work that has been placed in your charge and do it faithfully.
If there was a principle that Ellen White embodied whilst in Australia, it would have been that of Christian service. It is stated that she always had more than 10 people at her table for every evening meal. She was always on the go and never seemed to stop. When she'd complete one community project, she started on another, and then another, and then another. And because of this, Cooranbong was never the same because of her influence.
On April 28, 1897, the Avondale School opened with a staff of 6, 10 students and a visionary dream.
We must all work earnestly and intelligently to do the utmost to make this school as God would have it. No man's notions are to be brought in here.
But a school wasn't the only Christian institution that Mrs. White founded. There was a need to educate the ministers and gospel workers of the future. And so the Australasian Missionary College was built in 1897. Mrs. White had helped to lay the foundations and gave $500 to financially support the students through their first and second term. She was of the belief that this college would have a great impact on the community. In her time, Ellen White established schools, colleges, factories, and other large institutions. However, while she lived in Cooranbong, she was not revered as she is now. She lived a life of simple generosity towards her community, and to many, this had a greater impact on their lives than any institution could.
Ellen White's customary exercise of walking took her to many places around Cooranbong. But one place she frequented regularly was a clearing in the bush where the brush had been swept away. Here, sticks and debris would be piled up and set alight, and the bonfire's smoke and flickering light would attract the attention of those who had been eagerly awaiting the occasion. She would sit and wait as children slowly began to emerge from the trees and take a seat around the fire, looking earnestly up at the woman who had become their teacher and friend. On those days, Ellen's stories about Jesus and the Bible would captivate those children for hours on end, and each would end up going away from there with a new love for God. One witness wrote that Mrs. White was the soul of hospitality. All who came were able to freely take from her orchard, and none were left hungry. The spirit of giving was infused in every action. Her orchards, her bread ovens, her very table was open to the struggling, and she never ignored a call from God to help someone. One of the best examples of Ellen White's impact on someone's life is the story of a man whose family was on the brink. His wife was dead, and he had children to feed, but his money and supplies were dried up. On this particular day, he was so worried about what he was going to do when it was time for dinner, and he would have nothing when they heard the sound of a carriage pulling up. He went out of his home and found a man there with some supplies and money. Of course, the man was surprised and overjoyed and asked, "Who sent this?" Instead of claiming the glory for herself, Ellen White instructed her helper to say, "The Lord."
The members of the church are not all called to labor in foreign lands, but all have a part to act in the great work of giving light to the world. There is work for every mind and for every hand, all that would do the work of Christ.